Welcome to the MMA Fan Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Stu and Blake.
Hello and welcome to the MMA Fan Show. We've got a great show for you today where we talk to Brad Wharton, Cage Warriors commentator extraordinaire. And we talk to him not just about this weekend's Cage Warriors event, but also UFC 304, John Jones and recent criminal accusations that are going on him that could affect the Stipe Miocic fight, and the potential slip-up that happened at the weekend where they've announced potentially Max Holloway, Topuria, and Sean O'Malley, Merab to happen at the Sphere. Is it accurate? Is it not? We don't know. We're going to find out if we can. But before we get on to the whole show, Stu Whiffen, do you have some sponsorship stuff to talk about, sir?
Of course I do, mate. Of course I do. Ferocious Fightwear. They've been sponsoring the podcast for nearly a year now, and they're such top lads over there. So go check them out if you want your rash guards, you want your gum shields, your wraps, your shorts. Go over to Ferocious Fightwear. All the stuff will be in the show notes on YouTube and on whatever platform you listen to this on as a podcast. In there, you've got your discount codes, and as well as that, you can also find the discount code for Fat Candy, and Fat Candy is the other sponsor. They don't do rash guards, they don't do gum shields. They do sugary gems, and them sugary gems are freeze-dried sweets, so go check them out. We've just got a big box of goodies arrived at the studio. There was blackjacks, there was fruit salads, there was all of them kind of old school great sweets, but the twist is bananas. They put them in these big, I'm presuming, vats of like freeze dryers, and then they just expand to this kind of crazy texture. And look, I'm not gonna keep telling you about it. I'm gonna say, why don't you head over to Fat Candy? Go on Instagram and check out Fat Candy. The links to the website will be on there or in the show notes of this show, and there's a discount code there as well. So the sponsors are ferociousfightwear.com and Fat Candy. Shall we get on with today's show, Blake Harrison?
Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, this is us talking with Mr. Brad Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the MMA Fan Show. I'm Stu Whiffen, joining me always, looking far from fresh-faced today. How are you, Blake Harrison, mate? You sleepy bunny, you?
Firstly, fuck you. And secondly, yes, very, very tired. Got in from family holiday late last night. The wonders of EasyJet. We were going out there, flight was cancelled. So we've got Brad Wharton on the show. I'm assuming we're just going to have to say this immediately because you're going to see this on the screen because we're not in the studio because I'm a sleepy bunny, as Stu said. So Brad Wharton, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. And I'm impressed you're here at all. If you got in at 3:00 last night with family in tow, that's quite the feat, man.
Don't give him any sympathy, mate.
Oh, I like this. Can we do a new podcast for just me and Brad? I get some sympathy. But yeah, no, so it was a bit of a mad one. On the way there, EasyJet cancelled the flight at like 5 a.m. or whatever it was. So we were rushing around getting another flight. And on the way back, we were delayed 2 and a bit hours. And not just that, but it was the delay where like they'd got us on the flight and then delayed us. So it's like, I've got 2 kids and we're just stuck in a big metal tube. And no one's got any I'm cheap, and so I don't want to pay for all my data roaming and stuff like that. So like, no one's got any signal. We've got a couple of things downloaded on an iPad, and we're playing what we call Poo Head, which I learned as a kid as Shithead, which is that card game. Are you aware of that? We have like 3 laid down and 3 on top there. So we're just doing that for like 2.5 hours trying to entertain kids at a stupid o'clock at night. And I don't know why they get you on the flight and then delay you. Delay us while we're in the airport when we can walk around, use toilets, things like that. Don't do it on the flight. That's my gripe with EasyJet.
Well,
and then go on.
Well, I come back from my holiday as well a day or so ago, and I got delayed, but I got delayed on a boat. I've never been delayed on a boat.
What?
The channel was so fucking choppy. They couldn't dock. So they turned the boat sideways and went, we just got to sit it out for a bit. So I was essentially lost at sea like just basically zigzagging down this great big ferry, like with 2 cups of coffee, trying to sort of navigate me way around. So, yeah, planes, trains and automobiles, Blake Harrison. Who needs them?
No, who needs them indeed? I want to just get that teleportation stuff sorted out. If we can just do that soon. Just to walk into a big chamber.
Tomorrow's World in the sort of late 80s, early 90s had led me to believe that we'd have teleporters and flying cars by now, and I'm let down every day.
Do you know what I mean? I blame Jeff Goldblum, because if it weren't for him making the flyer, then we'd probably all have these teleporters now with just a few insect people roaming around as well. But
small price to pay.
Exactly.
I know, exactly.
I presume we'd be making the jump to hyperspace, like whenever we wanted to go on holiday, just like boom, done. Like,
is it The Simpsons or whatever, where they have like a tube system? Like you just jump in a tube and it just takes you to work. Like just jump in a tube system. Anyway, yes, we are going to be talking to Brad today about Cage Warriors prize fighter this Saturday, July 20th at Indigo at the O2, because it's going to be a very, very fun tournament. If you didn't watch our live draw of the tournament, stick around and find out exactly what that tournament has to offer, because it's going to be a lot of fun. We're also going to talk briefly about UFC 304, get Brad's opinion on that, and some of the Cage Warriors alumni like Tom Aspinall, Paddy, Molly, and the likes. A couple of Contender Series sort of announcements, I think we're going to say. Also, some news about John Jones, charged with a couple of things that we spoke about on this show back in March to do with when he was drug tested and some alleged abuse. And it means that if he's found guilty of these things, the Stipe fight's probably off, because he could be in jail for a year. So then we've got that to look forward to with John Jones. And then also there was a slight slip up on a Canadian broadcast, I believe, when it came to an announcement of some fights on UFC Noche at the Sphere. And we'll be talking about what those fights are at the end of the show as well. But first and foremost, Brad Wharton, you're here. You're the iconic voice of Cage Warriors. Can you please tell us about what's going down this Saturday, and particularly the prize fighter tournament and how that came about? Because the tournament is absolutely fascinating.
And also, Brad, just quickly, it's not just the prize fighter, is it? It's a stacked card as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot going down on Saturday. I think at the current time, we are on about 19 to 20 fights.
Wow.
There's been a couple of last minute changes, but Ian Dean's pulled one out of the hat as usual, and he's been able to rematch everyone. So we've not lost anyone last minute. So although some of us have been, some of us who have to commentate for 8 hours have been praying that 1 or 2 fights would fall off. We've actually got, one of the biggest Cage Warriors cards, certainly in the past sort of 10 years. So yeah, it's there's a lot going down. We're going to be starting super early, so there's going to be some early prelims starting from about 3:00, and then the regular prelims will start at the usual time of around 6:30. And there's going to be a full main card, a 6-fight main card from 8:30. All that's going to be on UFC Fight Pass. So they're easy to find if you're in most countries in the world. Obviously, we've got certain countries that are on different TV channels, but I'm pretty sure you can get it everywhere on Fight Pass. So they're easy to watch. And obviously, if you're in London, come on down. There's still a few tickets left. CageWarriors.com. Come and join the show.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that they should get down to that show is it's going to be a very special night with the first prize fighter tournament. $50,000 up for grabs for the winner, and a shot at the bantamweight title afterwards as well. 6 fighters, 2 are in a reserve fight, and then there's 2 semi-finals. The winners of the semi-finals will go and fight in the final. There's 2 fights for these fighters in one night. Was there any kind of difficulties in getting that clear? Because that sort of like makes us think of like the old kind of UFC days, like multiple fights in one night. And we've seen other organisations like the PFL or whatever try and do tournaments, but it's never more than like the one fight in a night, and then it goes on for months and months. This is all in one night. You're going to watch it as an audience member, either live or on TV, and you're going to see these. It's like, for me, it's like, as an old WWE, WWF fan, it's like King of the Ring. It's like they're going to go and they're going to fight multiple times in one night. To me, I think that's really exciting. But was there any difficulties in kind of getting that cleared, or getting fighters interested in taking 2 fights in one night or anything like that?
think, it's a tough proposition for anyone to say, yeah, I'm going to do an MMA fight and I'm going to do another one a couple of hours later. Obviously, having that 50K check, and we have had a giant comedy cartoon check made to hand out at the end. That's obviously a massive help. There are guys in this tournament who, Martin Yoni, for example, is the former champ. He never lost his belt in the cage. He could have walked into a title shot. Obviously, he went down to flyweight, fought for the title there. Didn't work out for him. Came back to bantamweight earlier this year, got a sick knockout. He could have walked straight into a title fight, but he was like, you know what? I fancy my chances against these guys. I wouldn't mind 50 grand for a night's work. So there we go. And then you've got guys like Alexander Luff, who, we asked him sort of what was the thinking behind saying yes. He was like, oh, how cool would it be to fight twice in one night? So you've got various different guys who are sort of up for this for different reasons. Wesley Meyer has had this thing about he wants to help his mum pay for a house on the beach back in Brazil. And he's like, look, if I get this check, that's bought and paid for. I'm getting the keys. So it's been really enticing for the guys to step into this tournament. I think, in terms of for both fighters and fans, it's good to change things up every now and again and offer something a little bit different. I mean, Cage Warriors has sent so many guys to the UFC, to the Ultimate Fighter, to the Contender Series. There's always been that sort of progression there, but to offer the guys something else as well to vie for over the summer, it's been pretty great. And the response we've had from coaches and fighters for this tournament, we've got the welterweight tournament coming up in September, and there's going to be light and featherweight in November and October, I believe, or maybe both in November. It's been huge. Like, they're the most stacked divisions that we have, and the interest from both guys on the CW roster and guys from outside CW has been really impressive. So I think with the upcoming tournaments, there's going to be a few faces that Cage Warriors fans won't have seen before. So again, getting to see something different other than the guys you already know and love and have been following.
And it's important. I mean, 50 G's is going to be life-changing for a lot of these fighters. But it's not just 50 grand. There is other money available on the night. Explain to the listeners how that extra money, could end up in a fighter's pocket. Because for me, this is the thing that makes it even more exciting.
So many, many years ago, over a few pints of Guinness, myself and Graham and a couple of other people came up with this concept of the bounty hunter bonuses. And we basically sat and wrote a list of the 10 or 15 craziest finishes we could think of. And fighters got a bonus if they could nail one of the finishes on the board, and then we'd start finish off and they could go for the other ones. The first night we did it, and one of the finishes was a flying heel hook, and we had a grappler on the card fighting a really lanky kickboxer. And in the warm-up room before the fight, this guy just basically lined all his teammates up and was just diving at their ankles for about 2 hours straight, practicing his flying heel hook. And then he goes and gets it in the fight, and whatever the bonus, I can't remember exactly what the bonus was. I think it was about $5,000 or something. But yeah, it was just absolutely amazing to sort of see quite a stupid idea that we'd had in the bar a couple of days before actually play out in front of us and go down really well. So Graham wanted to bring this back, but with a slight twist for the prize fighter tournament. So for the tournament bouts, fighters will give a prediction before they fight as to a round and finish that they want to go for. So they could say, for example, I'm going to win by flying knee in the second round, or I'm going to win by guillotine in the first round. If they hit that, that's an extra 10 Gs. So in theory, if you get it right twice and you win the tournament, you're going home with 70 grand instead of just the 50.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
That absolutely is.
Do you think that's going to play out in fights? Like, someone's going to be like, I'm going to win by left hook in the second round or something like that, and they're going to take it slightly easier in the first, and all of a sudden they're just spamming left hooks. It'd be like playing UFC 5 or something, just bashing the button constantly.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Look, so it's a lot of money to just have stuck on top of your fight purse. So I think, for anyone to sort of sit there and say, well, I'm not going to really bother about the bonuses, I'm just going to focus on winning the fights. That's all well and good until you start to think about the number of things you could spend 10 grand on, and all of a sudden it becomes appealing to sort of take that chance. Look, fighters are inherently risk takers, right? They're doing something incredibly dangerous for our entertainment, and they take that risk because they know what the risk entails, and they love it. No one's doing this because they don't like it. They're all doing this because it's the type of thing that matches the kind of personality they've got. So if all of a sudden you're dangling 5 figures in front of someone and saying, yeah, if you get that armbar in the first round, that's an extra 10 grand. These guys are going to be taking the risk to go for it.
And
Absolutely. That's going to be so much fun to watch.
absolutely, and if that's not exciting enough, am I right in saying we've got Jordan Vucenic fighting this weekend?
Yeah, Jordan Vucenic's on the card. He's obviously a massive favourite at the Indigo. That iconic walkout that he does to the Chasing Status song. He's a guy who's sort of organically become a bit of a Cage Warriors legend in the Indigo, to the point that when you get people in the venue who've maybe not bought a ticket to come and see Jordan, they've come to the show, but because they've been to the Indigo a few times before, the second that music hits, they know it's him. They have that reaction. You've got everyone singing along, and people just seem to love him. He's a real kind of man of the people type of guy, great personality, just sound, down to earth sort of lad. I think a lot of people will see themselves in a guy like Jordan. He sort of famously said that coming from Colby, you've got to be good at one of two things, either fighting or running away. And he was never much good at running. And I think that's something a lot of people will resonate with. He's now got a gym back in his hometown. He's giving back to the community, and you just see the comments on his Facebook posts and social media posts now from people who they're not necessarily that hardcore group of mates that always buy a ticket to his fight. They're people who've found him through Cage Warriors and are just showing their support.
Yeah, I mean, we've had him on a few times, and he's one of the nicest people that we've had on. He's such a lovely guy, and he's never in a boring fight.
No, absolutely not. He's he had that crazy fight against Paul Hughes in November 2022 that didn't go his way, but since then, he's fought 3 times. And he's got 3 second-round submissions. He's all action. Yeah. He's constantly evolving as well. He's obviously originally known as more of a striker, and he's coming out now and he's submitting guys left, right, and centre. You got Kimura last time out, which you just don't see very often these days in mixed martial arts. And he got it against a good guy as well. He's not going out there fighting scrubs. He fought a top undefeated Italian prospect in his first fight back after Paul Hughes. He's fighting a really tough Polish veteran in Adrian Kepper on Saturday night. He's taking risks. Interestingly as well, he's also moving up in weight. So this one's going to be at lightweight for him. He's been fighting at featherweight, and he's massive. He is massive for 145 pounds. And there's been a couple of times where you see him turn up on fight week a few days before he starts his weight cut, and you're like, oh my goodness, how's he going to make 145? And I guess he's just at the age now where he's thinking, you know what, I'm going to try things out at 155. Not have to cut that extra 10 pounds, see how that affects my performance. So we could be seeing a more energized, explosive Jordan Vucenic than we've seen before. And that, to me, is a very dangerous prospect.
Absolutely. We've seen, obviously, Paul Hughes, as you mentioned there, move off, not to the UFC, which surprised a few of us, I think. But do you think a win here for Jordan? Because, a lot of us have been expected to see Jordan get an opportunity in the UFC, and how far off do you think that is for him, Brad?
I think it can't be too far now. I think it's obviously it was right there for him ahead of the Paul Hughes fight. I think if he'd beaten Paul the second time, he probably would have been in. But look, that was the risk he wanted to take. And obviously, if you lose at that level, it does set you back a little bit. The UFC want guys with lots of finishes, clean records, and you're not going to go in so soon after a loss. But it's a loss to Paul Hughes, one of the best guys in the division in any organization. So there's certainly no shame in that. But the fact that he's been able to come out and he's beat a couple of really, really solid guys, he's defeated an unbeaten prospect. If he gets another finish here on Saturday night, I see no reason why he wouldn't be in the UFC next. Whether that's a sort of a late notice call up, or whether he maybe fights in Paris in September, or if it's London next March, I certainly think it's going to be on the doorstep for him.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of that kind of crop of brilliant featherweights. You had this Charriers, who's obviously gone to UFC, Paul Hughes now at the PFL, and Jordan as well, kind of interchangeable at points, it seemed, the three of them. And it'd be really great to see Jordan, who, as you said, such a lovely bloke, and we've had him on the show a couple of times, achieve that dream of getting to the UFC by hook or by crook, or whatever we can do for him. But
well, look,
let's go back to the tournament. What do you want to say?
No, go on, crack on, mate.
No, let's go back to the tournament, because the tournament is like an Ultimate Fighter sort of setup, isn't it? It's 2 rounds per fight, but if it's a draw after 2 rounds, it goes to a third round. And in terms of the fights themselves, you mentioned Martin Yoni, who we thought, very possibly could be the favourite for the entire tournament. But unfortunately for Martin Yoni, and this is our fault because we did the draw, he was drawn into the reserve fight against Giordano, an all-Italian fight. I'm assuming Martin Yoni and Giordano not too pleased about that because they're in the reserve fight. But reserve fighters, as we mentioned on the live draw, have got into finals of tournaments previously, haven't they? So it's not a total loss. That fight is still could be incredibly significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, interestingly in the past as well, like when reserve fighters have got into the finals of a one-night tournament, certainly with Cage Warriors, and if you look elsewhere as well, some of the early UFCs, UFC 3 had a reserve fighter go straight into the final, and that was 3 fights in one-night tournament. So he had a massive advantage. Well, I think what you saw with a lot of reserve fighters previously is that, the people in the bracket were sort of the top ranked guys. And the people who were in the reserve fight that was just matched independently were essentially backup guys, with all due respect. And that's not what the situation is here. We've got 6 really, really good guys, all of who could have gone straight in. And as we say, we've got, one of the top young prospects in Italy in Giordano against the former champion who's probably the bookmaker's favourite to take the whole thing in Martin Yoni. They're both in the reserve fight now. So it's like the cool thing about tournaments is like the chaos. You don't know what's going to happen. And we kind of got that twice because you don't know what's going to happen with the draw. You don't know what's going to happen with the actual tournament itself on the night. So, if we're in a situation where the reserve fighter has to be called upon, previously you might think, well, the reserve fighter is not going to be odds on to take this. But in this situation, it could be the guy who the bookmakers feel is the best fighter in the tournament stepping in. And that's not to mention the whole what if Martin Yoni does step in, but he's had a torrid 3-round fight and he's absolutely smashed to bits and knackered, and Alexander Luff has got a knockout in 15 seconds. So it changes all the expectations again.
Yeah, it's just going to be so exciting. I mean, the other 2 fights on the card that are the actual semi-final fights, we've got a rematch between Maya and Shirzad Qadrian, and we've got Alexander Luff versus Aiden Steven. What do you think out of the 3 fights, including that all-Italian war, what's the fight that excites you the most on paper?
It's such a tough question because there's a little bit of spice with all 3 of these, right? So you've got Martin Yoni and Giordano, who I think pretty much came out themselves straight away and said, obviously not happy to not be in the brackets, but this is going to decide the best unsigned bantamweight in Italy. So you've got that. That's a little bit tasty for me. Obviously with Shirzad and Wesley, it's the fact that it's a rematch. Wesley took their first fight. So, is he going to be going into this one overlooking Shirzad? You would say probably not, given that he's one of the guys with sort of the better fight IQ in the division and he's very experienced. But then Shirzad, by contrast, 23 years of age, is improving every time we see him. He's been out training with Khabib and the guys. The levels of improvement that we see every time he fights are what you would expect to see from a young guy, early 20s, who's in that developmental stage. So the Shirzad that fought Wesley Moya previously is very much not the Shirzad we're going to see on Saturday night. We've got a guy who's developed and come along leaps and bounds. You could say the same thing for Wesley as well. He's coming off a huge win over Lewis McGrillen in the PFL. His game is constantly evolving. We're seeing much more game planning going in now. We're seeing more of the ground game from Wesley. So that's an interesting angle too. And then with Luff and Aiden Steven, you've got a huge styles clash, the striker versus the grappler. You've also got the fact that Aiden Steven's last defeat was to Luff's teammate, Tobias Harila, who stopped him back in the pandemic days. So there's a little bit of revenge perhaps going on in terms of that. Aiden Steven maybe wanting to get that win back, perhaps en route to a rematch with Tobias Harila somewhere down the line. I know I've just completely not answered that question as which one is my favourite, but honestly...
No, but you've got us all... You've done your job, Brad. You've done your job. You've got us all excited about it. Every single one of the fights is significant, is meaningful, and there's spice in every single one of them, as you said. So we're all excited about it. And as I say, on top of all of that, Aiden Stephen might say I'm going for a rear naked choke in round one. Luff says I'm going for a big right hand in round one, and we can just see carnage. Maybe Maya saying I'm going to knock him out by a flying knee, and Kadrian's going to do an armbar. It's just going to, all these extra things with the bonuses, all that stuff, just really adds to the fights. And I think it's just going to, every single one of those fights is going to be exciting to see. And the fact that it's only 2 rounds as well, unless it is 1-1 and you go into the third, means that you've got to come out the gates. You've got to come out the gates quick. You've got to win that first round, put it on your opponent early. It all should breed an incredibly exciting night of fights.
Yeah, and the crazy thing to remember as well is that the final will be 3 rounds, but obviously if there's a draw in the final, if someone loses a point, for example, and there's a draw in the final, there'll be a sudden death overtime as well. So you're sort of preparing for, it's a 2-round semi and a 3-round final, but you actually might have to fight 7 rounds in the night, which is insane.
God. That is absolutely insane, but amazing on the fighters to be taking it. And yeah, I mean, that is a 7-round fighters going into a 7th round. But I don't know what we could see from that. That's going to be absolutely brilliant. I cannot wait for this tournament.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate, that tournament is all part of an already stacked card as well. And it all goes down this Saturday at Indigo at the O2. You can watch it on Fight Pass. And if you don't want to watch it on Fight Pass, you want to go and see it all before your very eyes, there's still tickets available, right, Brad?
Yeah, still tickets available at cagewarriors.com. You can come and join the atmosphere at the Indigo. It's such a sick setup. Everyone downstairs stands up. It's like a club night or a concert. But if you want to splash out a bit, you can treat yourself to a posh seat upstairs.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Well, look, we mentioned Dana White's Contender Series, and we've just seen Cage Warriors fighter Nathan in The Ultimate Fighter. What can you tell us about what's coming up because we've been told that Lon Kavanagh and Luke Riley, for me, probably the 2 most exciting fighters in Cage Warriors for me. I'm taking nothing away from Jordan. Luke Riley just brings something spectacular, and Lon Kavanagh's not put a foot wrong yet. So, I mean, surely these guys are going to be bringing some super fun excitement to the Contender Series.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the kind of the sort of blessing and the curse of working for Cage Warriors. Right? We're so privileged to have these guys in such an important stage of their career with us, but inevitably they will then move on to the UFC or elsewhere. But this is what we do. This is what we've sort of made our reputation on: developing these guys, building them, giving them the right fights, giving them the room to grow. And in a way, it's sort of it's a perpetual cycle because people see Cage Warriors veterans going on to fight on the Ultimate Fighter or fighting Contender Series or fighting the UFC or PFL or wherever else it may be, and they want to follow in their footsteps. So it kind of all works out right in the end. Look, Luke Riley and Lonnie Kavanagh, 2 of the best that I've seen come through. And I've been around a long time and seen a lot of people nearly make it, not quite make it, or go on to make it. And I'm confident in saying Luke Riley and Lonnie Kavanagh have got everything it takes. I mean, they're 2 guys that just get it. They get what they have to do outside the cage. They're elite at what they do inside the cage. And you've never seen them in a boring fight. You've never seen a boring round of a Lonnie Kavanagh or a Luke Riley fight. Just doesn't exist. The tape's all there. You search Luke Riley on the internet, you can find pictures of him in Thailand in Thai boxing fights, age 12, knocking 16-year-olds out. The guy's an absolute savage. And Lonnie's just got that incredible flow, that incredible style about him. They've both got the look. They've both got the charisma. And I can't wait to see them on Contender Series.
Fantastic.
Do we know anything about who they're up against yet, or is that yet to be announced?
I'm pretty sure it's out there. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to do a bit of quick Google foo. But if you want to search for it on Twitter or something, I'm pretty sure both have got their opponents out there.
We'll try and find that out in a bit.
I mean, we'll talk about lots of the sort of alumni of Cage Warriors when we speak to you shortly about some of the exciting stuff that's going to be going down in Manchester. But before that, Blake, I don't know too much about this, but you gave me a notice this morning and said, look, I think we should mention what's just sort of popped up on the newsfeed for John Jones in more trouble again. What's happened, mate?
So basically, back in March, I believe it was, there was a situation that we spoke about on the show.
Yeah.
Where some drug testers not from USADA, but from Free Drug Sports, I believe it is, that drug test for the UFC now, went to his house, and there was allegations of abuse, and I think what it is that he was threatening them with, again, allegedly threatening them with like potential lawsuits for coming to his house, and he took, again, allegedly took the phone off of a female drug tester and started filming her, and was generally, I believe, quite intimidating. The woman then went to the police, filed a report on John Jones, and now he has been officially charged with what they call misdemeanors in America. I don't know enough about the American legal system to know exactly what that is, but effectively what it boils down to is, if he is found guilty of, I believe, these multiple misdemeanors, I think one's a petty misdemeanor, one's something else, and one is obviously an allegation of some form of abuse. If he's found guilty of those things, he could serve, I think, just under a year in prison. And there's fines as well, but the fines are insignificant to someone of John Jones's financial status. But yeah, so it's yet another situation with John Jones where he's sort of just behaving in a way, or again, allegedly behaving in a way that most people would find utterly disgusting. And it just, it throws up other question marks of like, if you're that anti getting tested, why are you so anti being tested? Is it just the nuisance of it coming to your house at a time where you weren't expecting, but you signed up for this? This is what all the athletes are, that's part of the gig now, to be drug tested so that we have a clean sport. So why is he so upset about it? There's obviously been the picogram stuff and all that kind of stuff previously. And also, let's not forget, it was only a little while ago that there was allegations of domestic abuse and police reports where John Jones was arrested because of allegations of him hitting his fiancée and again, slightly resisting arrest as well, I believe. Didn't he headbutt the bonnet of a police car and damage it, or something like that? And it's just more John Jones. It's just more stuff to add to the list of John Jones doing John Jones things, and it could put that Stipe Miocic fight in jeopardy.
Would anyone give a shiny shit?
Well, here's the thing.
Does anyone want to watch that fight?
Well, let's ask Brad. Brad, so we've spoken about this. I must be boring listeners of this show talking about my just despise of this Stipe Miocic John Jones fight that we've had to. No one really wanted in the first place, in my opinion, other than Dana, Stipe, and John. And yet we've had to wait an extra year for it, obviously because John was injured. No fault of it that injuries happen. It's one of those things. But, we've got a guy in Stipe that's 4 years since his last fight or something like that, where he got knocked out by Ngannou. So it wasn't even a win. He's effectively retired. He's in his early 40s now or whatever. I'm just not interested in seeing him fight John Jones unless he were to come out of retirement and fight a top 5 heavyweight and win. If he fights a Sergey Pavlovich or an Alexander Volkov and gets a win, throw him straight into a title shot after that for sure. But to come straight back and fight John Jones, and we've had to wait 2 years for this fight that I feel like no one really wanted. It's been marketed as the greatest ever heavyweight versus the greatest to ever do it. I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid, as the Americans would say. It's not. I don't buy it. It's Stipe circa 2018, 2017, maybe, yeah, but not in 2024. What's your thoughts on? What's your thoughts on John Jones and this situation that's now occurred again, and whether or not it damages his legacy in any way, these constant run-ins with the law and stuff like that? And then also, what's your opinion on the Stipe Jones fight? And would you care if that fight got kind of pushed aside?
I guess in terms of like John Jones, like the athlete and the person and everything, if you want to talk about a guy who just cannot stay out of his own way, that's John Jones. Like a guy who's got every physical gift, every advantage, every platform he could ever have wanted to be remembered as only the elite athlete of entire sport. He's been given all that on a platter, and he just cannot seem to help himself screwing it up left, right, and center. Whether it's stuff like avoiding certain fights, whether it's his behavior outside of the ring, whether it's, with the allegations about avoiding drug tests and hiding under a training cage to avoid having to give a sample. Look, that level of stardom and the position he's in the sport, he's always going to have half the people loving him and half the people hating him anyway. But he just gives everyone so much ammo. I mean, the allegations about domestic abuse and the allegations about what's gone on with this tester, that's a different level entirely for me. It's absolutely abhorrent stuff if it's true. It's got no place in sport. Are the UFC going to do anything about it? Probably not.
What can Dana White do about it? He's caught on camera in a nightclub whacking his missus.
This is the thing. I think the precedent's kind of been set there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And look, at the end of the day, it's about money, right? They're doing this Stipe fight because they think it's going to be a big cash cow for them. Fair enough, it's going to get Stipe a nice big payday before he does eventually retire, but he is retired as far as I'm concerned. He's not coming out of retirement to fight Tom Aspinall. He's not coming out of retirement to fight Cyril Gane. He's coming out of retirement for a payday. And that's fair enough. You're not going to begrudge a fighter doing that. Would I watch it? Yeah, I'd absolutely watch it. It's John Jones. And I think if you are able to separate the athlete from the person, you should watch a guy like John Jones fight because he is probably the best guy to ever do it. If I was in the US and they were asking me to pay $80 for it, I think I'd struggle with a bit more with that than paying 20 quid over here or just watching it on Discovery Sports. So yeah, I think from my point of view, the reason that I'm not 100% up for this fight is because there's a better fight out there for John Jones at the moment, and we all know who that is. Whether it's Tom Aspinall who wins in Manchester or whether it's Curtis Blades, that should be the fight that John Jones is going to fight if he's going to fight one of these heavyweight guys. And I just think when that option's there, I'm always going to take the interim champion over a legacy fight.
Absolutely.
I agree with everything you're saying there, Brad. I'm also just looking up Stipe Miocic's recent record. So his last win was the Daniel Cormier fight back in 2020. And I believe I heard this on a podcast I was listening to the other day. So forgive me, I can't remember who said this, but I believe it's true because I'm looking for his Tapology page now. I'm not sure that Stipe Miocic has a win over a fighter in the UFC. I'm not talking ranked. I mean, in the UFC. I'm just going to run down a few names. Francis Ngannou, obviously PFL. Daniel Cormier, retired. And those basically, he hasn't fought anyone other than Francis or Daniel since 2018. Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, Fabrizio Verdum, Andrei Arlovsky, who's just left the UFC, Mark Hunt, Fabio Maldonado, Gabriel Gonzaga, Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, Phil de Vries. I mean, obviously some great names in there, but none of those fighters, unless I'm wrong, are currently signed to the UFC, let alone ranked.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
mate.
so when Arlovsky left after last weekend, that was the last fighter that he's got a win over in the UFC, which is a crazy stat, an absolutely crazy stat.
Yeah, and he's getting a title shot when we've got an interim champion who's been fighting pretty regularly. I think wants to fight even more regularly, but there was situations where I think the UFC have obviously saved him for the Manchester card, rightfully so. And all that.
Look, John Jones is smart, right? Like, he's done some very questionable things outside the octagon that aren't smart, but he's a smart fighter. And if he's got a chance to fight Stipe, and Stipe coming off of all the things that you've just said, that's a very winnable fight for John Jones. Or you're fighting Tom Aspinall or Curtis Blades, but let's say Tom quite happily go to the ground with him. Tom's probably faster on his feet than John Jones, arguably a better striker. How many knockouts has John Jones got? I don't think he's got any one-punch KO knockouts. I don't think he has.
No.
Like, he's not a knockout artist like that. He'll get you down, he'll submit you, or he'll ground and pound you. I don't think he's ever KO'd anyone. Like, and look at what Tom does. Like, I think that's a fight that John Jones must just be thinking, I might swerve this for a bit if I can. If that Stipe fight's there, I'll take that.
Well, I mean, in terms of what you said, I don't want to diminish John Jones too much. He had that head kick over DC, but was that the one that was turned to a no contest as well? Maybe I can't remember. But I don't know, man. The other thing is, here's something, Brad, that's been winding me up a little bit in my own little head. I think he will avoid Tom, but let's just say that John beats Stipe in November, the fight goes ahead, and say Alex Pereira is available to fight in like March. I think John fights Alex Pereira, even though Tom's still the interim champ, may have defended that belt twice by then. I think John goes, oh, well, there's more money in fighting Pereira, and he's not wrong because Pereira's become a superstar since UFC 300 and then 303 as well. I just think there's more money in it for John, which, you know, clever prize fighter, whatever you want to say, but it's so much an easier fight. This guy that's not a natural heavyweight having to come up, and then he's a striker that John can take down pretty easily. Do you think there's a world in which John Jones fights Alex Pereira and not Tom Aspinall in 2025?
I think there's absolutely a world in which that happens. I think, you know, for the UFC, it's a huge fight. You know, maybe somewhere like Saudi Arabia wants to put that fight on and pay an absolute fortune for the privilege. It'd be absolutely huge. You know, the UFC markets it as the champ versus champ, the greatest of all time versus one of the greatest kickboxers of all time. It makes every sense in the world from a marketing and a financial point of view. And, you know, from the direction that things have been going in for many, many years now, it seems like they're more interested in putting on these big fun fights than they are having a champ stay in a division, clean it out like you would see in the old days. You know, we never saw GSP go up until, you know, he came back out of retirement to fight Bisping. You know, he stayed in that division and cleared it out. And, you know, Jose Aldo was featherweight champion forever. Things seem to be different now, and they're just more keen on putting these fun fights on, which is fine. You know, it's great from a fan's point of view. I would absolutely love to go and see John Jones versus Partain. I mean, who wouldn't? Yeah, there's not amount of money you could convince me would be unreasonable for a ticket to go and see that or a pay-per-view. But it sucks from a sporting point of view when you've got a guy like Tom Aspinall, who is that new generation of heavyweight, who is the heavyweight champion. I'm not going to call him an interim champion. I think it's absolute nonsense. He's the heavyweight champion of the UFC at the moment, as far as I'm concerned. And if he has to be sidelined again, you know, it's not like boxing where guys are getting paid to sit aside. You know, he's going to have to fight someone else, and that really sucks for him.
Interestingly, just to throw another little thing in the heavyweight picture, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the word is that Dana White has said that he would be open to some kind of co-promotion, whether that be in Saudi or somewhere like that, where there's obviously, or Abu Dhabi, wherever, like that he would entertain a hybrid of organisations to make the John Jones Francis fight happen. I mean, I heard that last week, and I thought, I don't know if that's just talk or if that is, you know, something that could be explored more. But I mean, I'll be up for John Jones Francis Ngannou.
Well, that was the fight, right? That was the one we originally all thought we would get when John Jones went up to heavyweight, and obviously, you know, the circumstances that have transpired since with Ngannou leaving means it's not happened. Look, again, much like the Pereira fight, I would love to see John Jones versus Francis. You know, I think it's something that they'd love to put on in Saudi Arabia as well. You know, just something that's never been done before, something completely unique. That they'd love to have the credit for getting done, as we've seen with some of the heavyweight boxing they've been putting on over the past couple of years. So yeah, I mean, you just wouldn't bet against it. You wouldn't bet against it. I think Dana White as well would probably really, really love having John Jones beat Francis Ngannou and then retiring. I think Dana White would absolutely love that. But yeah, I mean, you know, you never say never in MMA, and especially at the moment when there is all this, you know, this huge amount of investment from various different places, big cities and countries paying massive site fees. You know, money does talk at the end of the day, and this is an entertainment product as much as it is a sporting product, arguably more so. So if there's a chance to do Jones Pereira, there's a good chance it happens. If there's a chance to do Ngannou versus Jones, I think it definitely happens. If there's money to be made, they'll do it.
Well, we've mentioned Tom Aspinall, and before there's any kind of chat of him fighting anybody else, he's got to fight Curtis Blades in Manchester in a couple of weeks. And just wanted to kind of discuss with you, really, Brad, some of the fights that are going to be going down in Manchester. And a lot of them have obviously found their way into the UFC via Cage Warriors. And I just wonder, off the top of your head, how you think that Tom and Curtis Blades, how that's going to go down.
Yeah, I can't wait. I really can't. I mean, I can't wait for this card, top to bottom. I think there's 9 fights that have Cage Warriors vet in, which is just awesome for me to see. And a lot of these guys I've known for a very, very long time. So, seeing them living the dream on the big stage is absolutely wicked. Look, I genuinely believe in Tom Aspinall. I've been a day one Tom Aspinall guy. Been calling this fight since he was an amateur. You see so many guys coming through, and then all of a sudden there's a guy with just that little extra something, that sort of unexplainable aura about them, and you're like, yeah, this guy is just a bit next level. And Tom Aspinall's been one of those guys. He boxing is incredible. His speed, his movement for a guy of his size, it's always been there. He's a little bit bigger back in the day, but he's slendered down, not lost any of his power. His grappling, which we've not seen a massive amount from him in the UFC. We saw him get that crazy submission against Andrei Arlovsky, who's a guy who pretty much never gets submitted. He's just got a bit of everything. I suppose the one thing we haven't really seen from him in the UFC yet is how he deals with like a long, drawn-out war. Can he get out of bad spots? Can he come back in the 3rd round and put someone away after taking a lot of damage? And I think Curtis Blades might be the guy to test that, because we know Curtis Blades can hit very hard. We know he can get those big takedowns and chew up the clock. So Aspinall might have to be the nail for a bit in this fight before he gets the chance to be a hammer. The thing with Tom Aspinall is when he does get that chance to be a hammer, only taking one blow. And we've seen that multiple times. I've got Tom in this one. If I was a betting man, then that's where the money would be. But I think it's going to be his toughest fight in the UFC to date.
It's the worst matchup for him, I think. Like stylistically, I do think Curtis Blades. He's probably. I would have much rather have seen him. I thought, even though he was fighting Pavlovich, that was looking like an absolute killer, I still thought, I think Tom's too good for him. But I've just got a little worry about this Curtis Blades fight. I really have. I think Curtis Blades is so fucking good, and I just worry. And if the fight goes Curtis Blades' way, I think we're definitely going to see Tom's grappling tested.
Yeah, absolutely. But Tom's not the guy who wants the easiest fight in the division. Tom's always been the guy who wants the best opponent possible. He's got that. He's had that mindset, drilled into him from being a very young man. This is a kid who's grown up in mixed martial arts. He's grown up in a fighting family. His dad obviously, has an incredible pedigree in the grappling side of things. He's grown up around fighters his entire life. He's been in the gym since he was a kid. This is a guy with a winner's mindset, and the guys that he's training with. There's this big crew of basically light heavies, heavies, super heavies that are all trained together up north.
It looked like the group shots just looked like monsters. It'd be like the worst door to ever turn up to on a nightclub if you had all of them on the door.
I just can't wait until someone tries to break in and steal the lead off the roof while they're all training. This would be the worst day of their lives. There's guys in that room that make Tom Aspinall look small. They're all high level guys. Phil DeFries is up there. James Webb, former Cage Warriors middleweight champion, who's just moving up to light heavy. He's been doing his fight camp for Saturday up there. And this, when you're training with guys who are so big and so talented in all aspects of the game, and these guys are hammering you every day, constantly, that's exactly what you want to see from a guy. You don't want one guy being the top dog at the gym and everyone else is sort of subservient. These guys are all active fighters or active grapplers or active, there's bare knuckle boxers in there. They're all pushing each other and they're all on fire. And I think you've seen that in Tom Aspinall's performance. It's not just the talent he's got, it's the people he's surrounded himself with as well.
Mick Parkin being one of them who's also on the card. Yeah. Shout out Big Mick. What a lovely fella he is. Okay, what other fights do you want to talk about? We don't want to go through the whole card, Blake. What are you thinking?
One of the most famous guys to come out of Cage Warriors in the last few years, Paddy Pimblett's probably got his biggest fight to date in the UFC. I know the Tony Ferguson fight was huge, but there was a lot of talk about where Tony was, 6-fight losing streak, all that stuff. He's fighting. Do we just call him King now? Has he just changed his name to King? But if you don't know what I'm talking about, Bobby King Green. This is a guy that's like, this feels like the biggest test of Paddy's UFC run so far. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Bobby Green, incredibly tough. Just beat the brakes off Jim Miller not too long ago. Yeah, you can't fault Bobby Green at all for the level of competition he's faced over the years and the talent he's got. Great striker, really, really underrated wrestling. He's going to give Paddy a lot of problems in a lot of places. And I think this fight's going to be the measure of Paddy. I think it's absolutely his toughest test to date. I think he's absolutely got the skills to deal with it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see, maybe that the flying triangle coming into play for the first time in the UFC from Paddy. But I think it's going to be on Paddy to get this one done quick. I think very few people benefit from being in a long, drawn-out war with a guy like Bobby Green. So I think the key for this, for Paddy for this one, is getting a hold of Bobby while they're both dry early in the fight, getting him up against that cage, and whether it's looking for the takedown or looking for the triangle, I think that's going to be the game plan. But very easy for me to say, sat in my front room here in Bromley, I'm not the guy having to pull it off with Bobby Green trying to punch my head in.
Absolutely. But I think that'll be a fun fight. I think the build-up to that, there's been a little bit of chat between the two of them. I think that could get very, very interesting as well. Look, I know that I don't believe he's a Cage Warriors alumni. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brad. See top in the bill, Leon Edwards against Bilal. Do you have any thoughts on that fight?
Yeah, I love Leon Edwards. He hasn't fought in Cage Warriors. But again, as someone whose career I followed for a very long time, back when he was competing on shows like Fight UK as an amateur, and his sort of rise through the regional scene up to the UFC. I think he's everything you want in a champion. It's a super nice guy, incredible story, absolutely phenomenal fighter, phenomenal athlete, a great representative for the sport in this country, and just an all-around kind of inspirational guy. I think this is one of those fights that kind of had to happen. There was the unfinished business there with Bilal from the first fight, which obviously ended before it got started. But I don't think Bilal Muhammad's the guy to beat Leon Edwards. I think Leon's going to style on him a little bit, and I think he's going to get him done way within the distance.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think he's been dealing with wrestlers for a while now. 2 Usman fights, 1 Covington fight. Now Bilal, I really think he's in the best place possible to deal with someone with Bilal's skills. Look, before we finish up, there was a random moment that happened on the UFC broadcast on Saturday, not in the English-speaking broadcast as far as I'm aware. It was in the French-Canadian broadcast of the UFC on Saturday, and they were talking about the Sphere event, UFC Noche at the Sphere. And I believe one of the commentators, who may not be commentating for the UFC for long, if he's made this mistake. No pressure, Brad, just in case, you ever have a moment like this in future. But I believe he said that 2 fights have been officially announced, and they haven't been officially announced, as far as I'm aware, for UFC Noche at the Sphere. And that is Max Holloway against Ilia Topuria for the featherweight title, and Sean O'Malley defending his bantamweight belt against Merab. Now, these are 2 fights, particularly the Merab and Sean fight, that we were expecting to happen. I think a lot of people expected that at the Sphere. But to have Max Topuria and Sean O'Malley versus Merab at the Sphere, I mean, Dana's been talking about them doing something incredible at the Sphere. And I think even talking about being happy to lose money on the event just to put on the most incredible thing at the Sphere. Do these 2 fights scratch you where you itch, Brad?
They certainly do. Persistently so. These are 2 absolutely fantastic fights. Now, probably worth mentioning, I think Ariel Helwani on Monday came out and said that the Max fight is not going to be at the Sphere as far as he knows. Obviously, really? nothing confirmed yet. So it could be. I think Ariel said that maybe the Shevchenko Grasso fight will be on the Sphere.
Well, that's what I expected, because obviously Grasso being Mexican, it being UFC not. I was expecting a Grasso fight at the Sphere.
Yeah, unless they go 3 title fights, which obviously they have done in the past for certain very big cards.
Because Dana said he's only going to do one event at the Sphere. Like, apparently it's just going to be a one-off. So maybe he's going to absolutely stack it. And would the BMF belt be on the line as well?
I don't think so. I mean, again, this is all hyperbole, as you've said, Brad. It may not be the case, but if it was the case that fight was happening and it happening at the Sphere, I don't think Topuria's done enough to qualify as a BMF. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love the gimmick with the rose.
I'll let you tell him.
Yeah, he's a bad motherfucker. He really is.
No, he
man.
is. But for me, it's, I don't know. There's something else about BMS. Like, Topuria is a better fighter than a Nate Diaz or a Jorge Masvidal, but they qualify as BMFs. And Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway qualify as BMFs. Topuria, in 4 years' time, I might go, yeah, that man's a BMF. But I don't know. BMF to me, it's not just about knockouts. It's not just about winning. It's something intangible. There's some fighters are just, that's the BMF.
Honestly, Brad,
and they
I love
don't even
this.
have to win fights.
I love this.
Do you not agree?
No, I do. I totally agree. But about 6 months ago, every time someone mentioned BMF, we were like, ugh. Now Max wins, and he wins it the way he wins. We're all over it now. This is the greatest thing ever, the BMF belt.
I think it's interesting, right? I think if they do the fight at £145, it's going to be a title fight. If they do it at £155, maybe they do it for the BMF, just so they can say, oh, it's a title fight as well. And then it doesn't really make a difference if if Topuria loses, they can then rematch for the featherweight title. So it kind of leaves a few options open. But yeah, I totally get what Blake's saying about the sort of mythical status of the BMF. It's not even just about wins and losses necessarily. It's about having that sort of that aura about you. And yeah, I think maybe in a couple of years, if Topuria does go up to 155 as well and go on an absolute tear there, I think maybe in a couple of years you can talk about that BMF conversation for him.
The other thing about that announcement though is that there's been a lot of talk about O'Malley versus Topuria in a super fight. If they were to put them on the same card, that makes me think all roads would, and both those fighters won, obviously, that would make me think if that happened at the Sphere and Topuria and O'Malley both won, I think first quarter of the next year in 2025, we'd be getting Topuria O'Malley maybe at like the Bernabeu or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be a big fight for maybe like a Super Bowl weekend card, or if they can get a stadium in Spain, that would be absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, Topuria just seems to be so big over there at the moment. It would, previously when you've seen the UFC go to new territories, like they've started off with fight nights and smaller events, but I think you've got to strike while the iron's hot with someone like Topuria and a very new nation to high-level MMA like Spain. In fact, I think if they can get a stadium, whether it's the Bernabeu or whether it's something a bit smaller, why not? Absolutely.
Yeah. Just before we start to sort of wrap things up, we mentioned O'Malley there and spoke about O'Malley fighting Topuria. Do you think he gets past Merab?
It's a tough test for him. It's certainly not a gimme. I think I haven't looked at the odds yet, but I would say they're going to have to be pretty close, and maybe even the closest he's had in a title fight since his first one. But I was kind of one of those guys that was a bit guilty of writing Sean O'Malley off at the start. He was one of the first guys to sort of come through the Contender Series, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, he's good at that level, but he's a bit of a goof. I don't really sort of jive with his personality or anything. But you can't say anything about what he's achieved inside the cage. The guy is absolutely phenomenal at what he does, and I just got a bit tired of writing him off and looking like an idiot, to be honest. I was thinking he was going to get crushed by a few of the guys he fought, but he's certainly that guy. So I think it's going to be, again, a really tough fight for him, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if we get another spectacular finish.
Yeah, and Max, I really hope they make Max bid Topuria. I think it would have to be 145 and for the featherweight belt. Whether it's at the Sphere or some other time, maybe they'll have to headline MSG. Let's see what happens with John Jones. But
I'd watch Max Holloway fight a heavy bag. To be honest, I just take my money. Man. I'll be all up for it.
Absolutely.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, love it. Look, Brad, thanks so much for coming on the show. Obviously, thank you so much for talking to us about Cage Warriors prize fighter that goes down this Saturday at Indigo at the O2, which is also available on Fight Pass, that incredible bantamweight prize fighter tournament that's going to be taking place there, along with a stat card including the likes of Jordan Buchanan. But thanks for also just chatting some shit with us about MMA as well. We'll have you on any time, mate.
No, thanks so much for having me, guys. Always really enjoy it.
Oh, absolute pleasure, Brad. Thanks, mate.